Hi everybody, this is section 21 of the novel 910 by Nora Raleigh Baskin. So we are in the midst of the action here in Brooklyn, New York. That means that our character is Sergio. If you look at the timestamp, 9:53 a.m. means that we are 50 minutes past the second plane impacting the South Tower of the World Trade Center. So that's Tower 2. So both planes have hit. Sergio's school is within visual distance of the Twin Towers. He can see what's going on from school. And as we've discussed earlier, there was at first a belief that the towers wouldn't fall. So they did tell people to remain calm, to remain where they were, to stay put, because they didn't want people clogging up the streets and getting in the way of the rescue workers who were heading towards the towers in the hopes of helping the people on the floors that were impacted by the actual airplane. So Sergio is still in school at this point. And so we're going to see this unfold around him. And later we will be looking at the account of students from Stuyvesant High School, which was 3 blocks away from the World Trade Center the day of the actual September 11th, 2001 attack. So we will get to see a real account, a nonfiction account of how students looked at this situation and what they endured that day. And we'll also be able to see how the students react 18 years later looking back. So we'll get some nonfiction accounts of this, and it will be interesting to compare that to what Sergio is experiencing here in our fictional version of the story. I think what you'll find is that Nora Raleigh Baskin did quite a bit of research to keep this as authentic and real as possible. When a second plane, Flight 175 with 56 passengers and 9 crew members on board, flew directly into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, there was no mistaking what was happening, and nothing was going to keep the older kids in school. Flames were leaping from the 2 towers now, reaching into the blue sky. Gray smoke formed a giant cloud that hung over the buildings and expanded outward, like paint slowly being spilled onto an empty canvas. So here we have a simile that describes visually, puts a picture in your head visually of what the cloud of smoke coming from the towers looked like. And it really is very effective. We've all seen paint kind of slowly creep across a sheet of paper or a canvas or, something that we were working on. And that is what that smoke looked like in the sky. It was a beautiful blue sky day, but that cloud grew and grew and gradually spilled across the New York City skyline so that you could no longer see the blue sky. Sergio could hear sirens coming from all directions, wailing and screaming out, and he thought immediately of the firemen. It was an old and far away but very familiar feeling of loss that leaped into his gut. The kind of feeling that had no words, that his body had held onto, even if his memory had not. So this familiar feeling of loss in his gut, that immediate thought of firemen, that fear, what is driving that right now? Who is he worried about? If you don't know his name, you should. It should be in your chart. He's worried about Gideon. And that feeling of loss is the same feeling of loss he experienced when? His memory can't hold on to it, but his body certainly did. He equates the loss of Gideon to the loss of his mom. And he's convinced that he's going to lose Gideon in all of this chaos, because he knows a few things. Number one, Gideon was scheduled to work that day because he had switched shifts with somebody whose anniversary had been the day before. So Gideon was scheduled to be a firefighter on duty. He also knew, number two, from his interactions with Gideon, that Gideon was the kind of guy who was going to go directly into the danger to try to help others. So already in Sergio's mind, he's mourning the loss of this very new but very significant friend that he made 24 hours earlier. Gideon would be running toward the fire, running to help, heading directly toward that mess, running right into it. That's what we're trained to do, he had told Sergio just yesterday. Sergio stood at the window of his classroom with the rest of the kids, hoping to see what was going on. He didn't want to feel this dread that was building up inside him. He didn't want to be scared, but he was. He could remember Gideon's face, his expression, his calm, but commanding voice in the subway. How did he do that? How did he stay so focused with all the mess going on around him? Sergio turned away from the window. The teacher hadn't shown up yet. Maybe she wasn't coming. Maybe he should be going somewhere like everyone else in the halls. Did Gideon have no fear, or did he just push it away? What do you think, folks? This is something to ponder, something to consider. Are there people who are truly fearless, or are there just people who know that their fear isn't the most important thing going on in that moment? It's kind of an interesting question, isn't it? Think about it. There was fear in the classroom now. It fed off itself from one body to another like heat shimmering off asphalt in the summer. Undefined and blurry. So there's another simile trying to capture the emotional feeling of the moment, that the fear could almost be seen from the way people were reacting. No one knew what was happening, but somehow everyone now knew it was something bad, really bad. The halls were filled with kids and teachers. Parents were starting to show up, running through the building, grabbing their children, crying. Grown-ups were crying. Then the principal came over the loudspeaker, dismissing all the upper grades and telling everyone to go directly to their homes. Girls were crying in the halls. Boys were too. Their voices carried into the classroom. A plane had accidentally hit one of the towers. Accidentally? And then another one? Accidentally? Some kids said they'd seen it happen. It was a bomb. It was an attack. It was a plane. It flew directly into the side of the building. That's no accident. Sergio walked over and turned on the television in the back of the classroom. He started flipping through every station. Or was someone else doing that? And he was just standing, just watching the screen. It didn't matter. He struggled to stay inside his body, to focus, and to push away the fear. So here we see that Sergio, and I'm sure many other people in his position, was in shock. Because he is really not able to remember who is doing what. He's not even aware if he's the one who turned the TV on. So that shock is definitely something he experiences. And then that pushing away of fear, that is definitely a heroic struggle. Because it's not easy to push away fear. Your body is programmed to have fear, to help preserve itself, to save itself, to prevent you from putting yourself into dangerous situations. So there are actually fear hormones and stress hormones that are released when you're in a dangerous situation. And the reason those exist is so that your body can know that you're going to be safe and take good care of yourself. So it's not just Sergio fighting mind over matter. It really is Sergio fighting the biology of how human beings are programmed. One of the TV reporters said there was a giant gaping hole in the side of the Twin Towers like a cartoon explosion. And someone else said it was like the end of the world. Fear was like a cloud itself, threatening to suffocate him. So fear is being compared to a cloud. Again, we have simile. Within minutes, it seemed, an hour, it seemed too, the school started to empty out. Classroom doors flung open, glass windows cracking. The world was on fire, fierce yellow and angry red. The sky over Manhattan was gray with soot in a halo of blue and a shroud of black. So just so you know, a shroud is a burial cloth that you would put over a dead person. So this idea of it being shrouded in black, it means that the city is almost already in mourning from the losses that it's suffering. So this is a metaphor. It's a comparison that does not use like or as. Additionally, we see that Sergio seems to have lost track of time. Minutes that pass, but hours could have passed. And again, that's a symptom of being in shock. You lose track of the ability to monitor time. And that is what happens when your brain is trying to process something that's so unfamiliar and so frightening and so overwhelming that it really isn't able to keep track of something as basic as time. 56 minutes after the second plane crashed, with only a few kids, Sergio being one of them, still left in the classroom, staring out the window, there was a horrible, cracking, popping, bang, 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 booming sound that lasted forever. He could hear it in his head, and like a crack in the fourth dimension, a fracture of the Euclidean plane, Sergio could watch it happening on the television. Oh no, it's going down. The whole building, it's going down. Someone in the room started counting the seconds as if no explosion could last that long. It couldn't, but it did. 7, 8, 9, 10. Cracking, popping, exploding, bang, 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 as if each floor was falling onto the other, and when it finally ended, there was nothing but smoke. No red, no yellow. I'm getting out of here. Holy crap, that's it for me. There were no thoughts left to think. Sergio's body followed the rest of the students into the chaos. So let's pause here for a moment. We see this idea of the booming sound that lasts forever. We know that that's not literally true, but it felt like it's Sergio in the moment. That is hyperbole. It's exaggeration. When we take a look at the way this is described, the idea of this collapse was unfathomable to the people who lived through it. Because remember, these buildings were built to withstand incredible hurricane force winds. They were built to withstand flooding. They were built to withstand earthquakes. Nobody could imagine that they would collapse, but it really was the intensity of the heat of hundreds and hundreds of gallons of jet fuel burning inside the building for a long period of time that liquefied the titanium structure and made that building fall. So this was something that was, again, beyond anybody's imagination that this could even happen. And so where it might seem kind of counterintuitive to us that they're going to go out into the street now that the buildings have collapsed, it really didn't seem safe enough for them to stay put as close as they were to the collapsed buildings. Everyone started pouring out into the streets, some running away and some headed like lemmings to the sea, toward the waterfront, running toward the river, trying to get a better look. Kids were climbing fences and scaling fire escapes of strangers' houses just to see what they could see. And from all angles, from in front and behind, came the wailing sound of sirens. First responders, Gideon had called them, the firefighters and police that arrived first on a scene and took care of the wounded. We're the ones who have more training in medical emergencies, Gideon had explained. Not as much as EMTs, but more than your average first aid course. You know what I mean? Sergio had nodded. Like you did with the guy on the train. Exactly. It was clear that the world was about to blow apart if it hadn't already, and suddenly nothing else mattered but getting home. It was a primitive instinct, a drive, a need to find family no matter how far. Get home. Sergio started to make his way back to his apartment. His grandmother would be at work by now. So should he turn and head that way? Or would she be making her way to him? Would she be running home too? Home. He knew he should have run home, and he listened to his footsteps hitting the sidewalk pavement loud, thumping one after the other in rhythm with his breathing like he was inside of a wind tunnel. All sounds were exaggerating. The world was screaming out loud. That is a horrific and accurate description. But it is still not possible for the world to scream. It is personification. Ambulances sped by on the street, one after another. His grandmother had taught him to pray, but he had long since stopped doing that when she wasn't around. What good was it? But there was too much noise, too much panic and fear spilling into the streets and rising up into the sky. Sergio ran and he prayed for his grandmother to be home when he got there, for himself to know what to do, and for Gideon to be safe. Police sirens were wailing and cops were not paying one bit of attention to all the black teenagers loitering outside the school, running down the sidewalks and the middle of the street. Fire trucks and more fire trucks, all speeding toward the bridge in a blur of red and white, a deafening, endless ribbon, heading toward the bridge, heading directly into the chaos. The flames and sirens and smoke. Gideon was heading right into it. Sergio was running the other way. But what else could he do? Get home and hope that home was still there. There were a few boys from his school leaning over a metal fence and straining their necks. Sergio called up, "What do you see?" "Oh, God," one of the boys kept saying, and nothing more. Nothing else. "Oh, God." Sergio felt his feet leave the ground. He hoisted himself up. He gripped the metal bar at the top of the fence. "Hey, make room." The boys scrambled over, and Sergio positioned himself as high on the fence as he could. From this vantage point, it was clear view, directly across the river to where the World Trade Center had once stood. Sergio could see people, hundreds of people, streaming off the island of Manhattan. And they were all white. Even the black folks were white. White like powder. White like ghosts. Running in slow motion. Walking across the bridge into Brooklyn. White with the ashes of 1,000 dead, covering their faces, their bodies, covering the earth. So this happened where these people who were covered in ash and soot had no way to get off of Manhattan Island. All the bridges and tunnels had been closed. If you go back to your timeline, you'll be aware that that actually occurred at 9:21 in the morning to prevent any further attacks from coming into the city. So these people who are trying to escape what they just witnessed were actually walking across bridges, trying to get wherever they needed to go, trying to get home. So this is a very descriptive piece of literature that Nora Raleigh Baskin has created here. She has researched this thoroughly. A lot of the account rings true to what we're going to see from the accounts of students from Stuyvesant High School. So at this point, we're going to end section 21. And the next time we meet up, it will be in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 9:41 a.m., which is just 20 minutes after the hijacking of Flight 93 and about 20 minutes before its crash.